Welcome everyone to our webinar today. We have a few members already in the chat and in the call. I think we're still waiting on a few more minutes to let everyone get in, and then we can start off our session. But we're really excited that you're here today. We're really happy to see such a large crowd with us today. I'll be walking you through the chat features in just a few minutes on how we're going to do polls and how we're going to do chats, and also introduce our speakers for today as well. I just want to make sure that we can get our audience in and make sure that all the attendees can be there. So I see the first groups of you are here. I can see some of you are here via phone and some of you are here via laptop. That's great. So we're happy to have you all with us today. What you're going to notice in your environments is the chat window is open. There's a chat availability. It'll be on the right-hand side of your screen. And in there, you can see there's a chat messaging board as well as a Q&A board. And there's also a polls board. So we're going to have a couple of polls today, and we're also going to have your questions and answers going on today. I do want to let you know this session is being recorded, as we like to do that for quality management purposes and make sure that we can share the information with the world. So your names and your information will not be recorded, but we will be narrating the questions to make sure that we can give you the answers to the topics. If you'd like to share this webinar later on within your team, please feel free to do so. We'll be sending out a link to it as well. And we will be posting it on YouTube in about a week or so. So that's kind of how we go through the webinar. So if you'd like to have the slides or the information, and sometimes we even do get a request for a participation certificate. So if you'd like anything like that, please do feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to provide that to you. So we're almost there with our registration and with everyone coming in. So I would say let's go ahead and start. My name is James Frankham. I'm going to be your host for today. And today the session is Overcoming Lab Compliance Challenges. And the two most important speakers here today is Katie, Dr. Catherine Leclerc, as well as Susanna, Dr. Susanna Costa Barros, who are going to walk you through the processes today. Let me introduce them. Katie is a compliance expert in data integrity, working within GxP-CC, focusing on data integrity and computer systems validations with a passion for sustainability. As a consultant at GxP-CC, Katie works to meet clients' individual compliance needs by conducting assessments of their current status quo, planning implementation of new systems, or becoming part of the validation team. In her free time, you'll find Katie improving soil health and biodiversity in her garden. And we also have Susanna. Susanna is also a consultant within GxP-CC and is a biologist with a PhD in biomedicine and over 7 years of hands-on experience in the research area of various fields, including cancer biology and metabolic disorders. Using her broad laboratory expertise and dedicated consulting experience, she aims to foster scientific thinking and regulatory knowledge to provide regulatory compliance leadership in the life science and pharmaceutical industry. She's driven by passion for regulatory strategy, drug development, and clinical research that improves patients' lives and ensures patient safety. She is originally from Portugal, has lived in 5 countries, and speaks 3 languages. And with that, that's my introduction to our 2 speakers and presenters today. So I'll just hand over the microphone to them, and we can start off our session on overcoming lab compliance challenges.
That's great. Thanks so much, James. Glad to be here today with you all. Thanks for joining us. Here's our agenda for today. So first, we're going to look a little bit briefly at why compliance in drug development is important. You probably already know that's why you're here, but we're going to go through it, bring everybody in. Then we'll get into the lab compliance challenges, and these will be top topics that we've seen in FDA warning letters and other regulatory citations. And at the end, we'll come around to some resources that you can use to help overcome some of your compliance challenges if you have any. And as James said, anytime if you have questions, please write them in the Q&A box. We would love to hear what's on your mind and be able to address those for you. So as we get started here, I want to tell you a little bit about us. Who is GxP-CC? Why are we leading this webinar today? We are a GxP consulting firm that specializes in providing a way forward through compliance challenges for life sciences and pharma companies. We're a trusted partner of global firms for over 10 years, and we're small, so that means we're nimble and we're flexible. And what I love about that is that we know one size doesn't fit all. So we really take a tailored approach and always ensure a secure and risk-based approach to achieve sustainable compliance for you, whatever that situation you might be in. So with that, let's dive in. Susanna, would you walk us through why our focus is on compliance today?
Absolutely. Thanks, Katie. So in the next couple of slides, I will guide you through the applicable guidelines across the different drug development phases and why GxP compliance is so important in the pharmaceutical industry. Katie, would you? Yeah, thank you. So starting with the first phase of the drug development landscape, research and development, even though it's not mandatory that companies follow the good practices regulations, it is highly recommended that they follow good laboratory practices as well as good manufacturing practices, especially when conducting studies with investigational medicinal products, because most likely the data that will be generated during this phase will support regulatory submissions that will allow companies to move on to the next stages of the drug development process. So once companies have their INDs and CTAs approved by the respective regulatory entities, they can move on to the clinical research phase where they conduct clinical trials with human subjects. And here is imperative that companies follow the good clinical practices, good clinical laboratory practices, and good manufacturing practices. So there's many reasons to follow these guidelines. But again, one of them is to generate reliable and trustworthy data, so they can trust the quality of their products and prove that to the regulatory entities. So once they finish conducting their studies, they gather all this data and they submitted it to the regulatory entities, and for a certain period of time the respective entities will review this data, and if everything goes well, their drug is approved and can be launched into the market. So once the drug is launched into the market and sold to the public, companies must keep monitoring the safety of these drugs. So they follow drug safety monitoring program, and for that they must follow good pharmacovigilance practices, as well as they need to make sure that their manufacturing processes are following the good manufacturing practices, as well as good laboratory practices for their quality control analysis before releasing the product to the market. With that, we move on to the next slide, where
before we go, Susanna, we've got a
we
little
have
poll
a
for
poll.
our
That's
participants.
correct.
James, would you start that up for us?
Absolutely. So what's going to happen now on your screen, you're going to see a poll. We'd like you to answer it, and we can go ahead and show you the information. So really what we're trying to get a good feeling of is, what area of the landscape do you work in? Are you working in research and development? Are you working in the clinical trials environment? Are you working in the regulatory approval environment? Or are you working in the drug manufacturing environment? And we'll just keep this poll open for just a few more seconds. We want to make sure that we can get a good snapshot of who's actually participating today and what areas that you're in. Like we said in the beginning, on the right-hand side, you'll see the polls window. You'll also see the chat and the Q&A functions. If during the course of today, if there's anything that you'd like to look at in more detail, please do send us a chat or a question in the Q&A. I'm monitoring that in the background, so we're happy to see that as well. So in the meantime, we've got a lot of feedback here on the poll. I think we got a mixed view. I'm just going to close the poll, then we should see the responses pop up. So here we can see 24% of our participants are within research and development, 18% are within clinical trials, 6% are within regulatory approval, and 53% are within drug manufacturing. So back to you, ladies.
Yeah, really interesting. It's great to see people from all over the landscape there.
Thanks, James. Yeah, so now one of the most important slides of this webinar, why is GxP-CC compliance so important? So one could say, well, because we want to conform with the laws and regulations and not have the authorities in our hair after an inspection. But I would like to encourage you to go beyond that, or to understand that it's much more than that. It's much more than being audit ready. So it's important to ensure product quality and protect patients' health and safety. So one way to support GxP compliance is to have quality systems implemented in your labs or in your company, because these quality systems are designed to establish and to monitor quality standards, and they help companies being transparent and to have good documentation practices. And this also instills the sense of quality culture that further in this webinar, Katie will tell us a little bit more about what is this quality culture about, and why is important to have one in your company. And with that, I believe we can move on to the first key challenges. Katie, could you please share? Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so this is where, for me, the fun starts. We're going to be looking at some challenges that are the most common ones that companies face according to the audit findings from regulatory agencies, primarily the FDA. And actually, FDA warning letters and similar citations can be a really great resource for companies to understand what the regulatory view is. And different suggestions often are provided within those letters that can be applied to really kind of level up your compliance and make sure that it's at the best, in the best state that it can be. So we have our, as I go through that, I'm also going to use this example laboratory data flow to kind of help you think about where these more theoretical ideas might fit into your system. So in this kind of schematic of the data flow, it starts with a device, which generates critical data for your entire process. And that's typically linked to some kind of PC that you're using, pulling the data in, and then it will run through interfaces throughout any of these steps that will go to something like maybe a laboratory execution system or a laboratory information management system. And so you've got this whole flow of data that you can see in front of you, and think about where these different risks are popping up and where you can apply some new measures. So we're going to open up another poll in just a second. I put next to that as well, maybe a more realistic representation of what a data flow diagram would really look like. You can see that it's more complex than the kind of schematic that I'm showing you as we go throughout the different challenges, but it can be really helpful to just give us that little overview. So James, you want to open our second poll?
Absolutely. So here the poll is, which systems are in your data flow? So looking at that, what we'd like to see is what's really happening on your data flow when you're creating data until you go through the whole process. You can have multiple responses in here. You just have to click on the different ones and click on submit. But the choices we have here is electronic lab notebook, lab information management system, instrument control system, lab device, or other. And feel free to put that in the chat. So all you need to do again is click on a box or boxes. Go ahead, click on submit, and then we'll have a chance to see how that looks. So I'll be having the poll closed in just a second. So really what the main point here is, and what Katie's speaking about and what we are looking into, is when we look at the different systems going through the data flow and the different lab environments that are out there, we want to make sure that we're protecting them. We want to make sure that we're collecting the right information. We want to make sure we're following the data integrity principles, the ALCOA and ALCOA Plus and ALCOA Plus Plus, and all those other pieces. And if we look at this now, I think we can go ahead and close the poll. We got a great mixed response here. And what I want to do is kind of just let you know where we ended. So when we say which lab systems are used in your data flow, 14% are using electronic lab notebooks, 32% are using lab information management systems, 27% are using instrument control systems, 27% are also using lab devices, and no one is using the other option. I guess that's too much chatting in there. So I don't believe you, but it's okay. You can gladly put in things in the chat or into Q&A. But really, what we want to make sure is kind of seeing what systems are you using in your lab flow? How are you bringing those together? Katie, back to you.
Great, thank you. Yes, you can think about that as we go through, and I hope it'll help you relate a little bit to what we're going to be talking about today. So let's get into our first challenge. That's inadequate security and access controls. This is incredibly common. Here's an example of an FDA warning letter excerpt where there were not appropriate controls in place regarding access. And so in response, the FDA requests a comprehensive and independent assessment and a CAPA plan for computer system security and integrity. They also required a list of all software configurations, as well as all of the user roles and associated user privileges. And that's for all devices, right, throughout that whole data flow that we were talking about. This should be something that's pretty easy to provide because the software configuration should be in your configuration specification. Your roles and privileges should be there as well, and also most likely in your functional specifications. So this could be something where if you don't have that in place, that's a really great place to start to get everything kind of mapped out and bring things up to speed. The last thing they're requesting is system security provisions. So these would be technical controls, such as whether there are unique usernames and passwords in place. And I'll say as well, for this, I think you're about to mention it, James, right? Our blog?
Yeah, I was about to jump in on that. Yes, absolutely. So if you want to learn more about those things, system security, control features, especially when we look at lab equipment, we just recently issued a blog on that topic where we do share that information in more depth. The reason we're bringing up the warning letters in this session today is, well, first of all, what kind of consultants would we be if we couldn't show you warning letters? No, but in all reality, it's great to learn from the warning letters, and it's great to learn what others are doing. When we look at working with the FDA and working in an FDA-regulated environment, this is the fastest way to get the information from the regulator, is you read the warning letters, you read the suggestions, and you read the recommendations and the requirements that the FDA is putting out. It's a lot quicker for the regulatory body to put it out in a warning letter because it's publicly available than trying to pass a new law or an addendum to it. If we look just back historically at 21 CFR 210 and 211, these were written 45 years ago, and they haven't really been updated since because it takes a long time to push a new law through in the US or in any country for that. But back to the point, we bring up warning letters because they're here to help you get the current information, the current thinking of the regulatory piece. And if you'd like to dive more into the point, what Katie's showing here in this slide, we do have a blog on the topic, and I'll be posting the link to the blog in the chat room as well. Back to you, Katie.
Thanks so much, James. Yeah, so those will be all of the challenges that we're talking about today. You'll be able to see in more depth there if you're more of a learn by reading kind of person. So I put the regulations that are applicable to security and access control up here for you on the right. Some other solutions that might help you to address if you have a similar problem. One is updating your technology to ensure that technical controls are in place, right? So, for example, can your devices all provide individual logins? Ensuring that your standard operating procedures regulate all three areas of the access control. So that would be the human, the technical, and the procedural. A good example of a human control would be regular trainings for your people, that they understand what the access controls are and why they're important. A technical control example would be the access configuration, and procedural control example would be your role-based access concept that kind of provides the whole framework for what the technical specs are built around. And if we bring this concept back now to our example data flow diagram, you can see throughout here, right, this would apply to every part of every system in this flow. All of them require technical and physical controls so that you ensure both data integrity and cybersecurity. So you also really get two great benefits out of this at the same time. The next really common challenge is out-of-date, what's often called legacy systems. Now, the regulations are quite clear that computerized systems should be periodically evaluated to confirm that they are still in a validated state and complying with the current GMP rules. So at the bottom, again, we've got an example for you to see how that plays out in a citation. In this case, the FDA requested technological improvements to increase the integration of data in the lab into the LIMS network. So this company did have a LIMS, but they weren't pulling that data in from devices like balances and pH meters to really leverage all of what you can get out of the LIMS. And that's a really important piece when you have new technology, to try to leverage all the capabilities as much as you can. They also asked for an independent and thorough retrospective assessment going back the last 3 years into the laboratory system design, control, and staff practices on data integrity. And the point that it's an independent assessment comes up a lot in warning letters. It's often recommended by regulators. And I think that's really because it can be very difficult to identify gaps from within. You're used to a system, you're working with it all the time, you know how it should run, right? And that's not always the easiest mindset to approach with when you're trying to really look for gaps and make improvements. So you'll see that a lot in warning letters. And they also asked for a complete assessment of the documentation systems used throughout the whole manufacturing and lab operations. So the regulations that are applicable are up there for you. What are some solutions? Well, seeking out compliant technical systems is the big one, right? Looking for something where you can upgrade those technical requirements. You can get a lot of good information by networking with experts through conferences or trade publications, or even speaking with an experienced consulting firm. Another important thing to do is to document mitigation measures until you can implement that compliance solution. So that can be really helpful for you as a company to kind of take a stepwise approach and not have to, I think there's sometimes a bit of a fear of, really implementing too much at once, that it's too big of a hurdle, there's too much of a burden. There are ways to really go stepwise and take it one at a time. And at the same time, because you're documenting it, you're able to show that progress to the regulators. You're able to show that you understand your risks and that you have the situation under control. And that really helps when it comes to audit time. And it will help, of course, your business processes too, as Susanna talked about in the beginning. So solutions that complement what you already have going on may be feasible and almost certainly are feasible. So we've got another one for you. Susanna, would you tell them about it? I don't hear your audio. James, do you hear her?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
Oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
I had
Thank
my
you.
micro up. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so I first of all, Katie, I was saying that it was a great insight that you just shared with us, and I would like to move on to the next challenge, which is the difficulty that companies often face on capturing complete data sets. So having complete data sets around all the activities that are involved in the batch release is essential. So, and this is why FDA during this inspection, this is what FDA found out during this inspection, that this company didn't have their data sets complete. They did not account for the full chain of data across all the systems in the lab. So this is important to have in mind, to not only focus on only one system, but to think about all the systems that you have in your lab. And this earned them a warning letter or a finding. So in this letter, they asked them to provide or to do thorough retrospective assessment into the impact of laboratory system design, control, and their personnel practices on data integrity and retention since 2017. So as you can imagine, this was probably a big burden for the laboratory personnel. So it would be advisable to avoid such thing if companies would be accountable since the very beginning with their full data sets. So another thing that the agency asked this company to do in the meantime was to come up with a remediation program to ensure that all data modifications were ensured, and that these modifications are authorized and all data is retained. So one way to avoid this, yeah, so using again Katie's the data flow that Katie showed in the beginning, as I said, it is important that companies account for the full chain of data across systems and not only focus in one. So having a data flow diagram can really help companies to know where they should exactly look at, and of course all the interfaces that are across this data flow should be evaluated to ensure their integrity and that data is not lost or modified across the data flow. So
Yeah,
moving
that's
on
really
to,
important, Susanna. I actually have a situation right now in a project where we have data going from a LIMS into a manufacturing execution system and back again. So that came to mind as a great example of something you would really need to account for when you're looking at the completeness of that data set. Really cool.
yeah, thanks, Katie. That's a very nice example. So yeah, going to solutions. What can you do in your lab to avoid such a situation? As I said, be accountable for the full chain of data across systems early on in the process, or conduct a retrospective assessment rather sooner than later, so you avoid these kind of findings during an inspection. And of course, you can always find resourceful help in the regulations, so Part 11 and Part 211. As per this regulation, labs should follow the ALCOA principles. Mainly, your data set must be complete and include metadata like audit trails, units, etc., and not only have static results, but also dynamic data. And of course, they should be original. So yeah, moving on to the next challenge. So even though it's essential to have their complete data sets, but what if you don't know where to find all this information? So one way is to have your audit trails in place, and better than that is to have a strategic approach to know what to do with the audit trail and how to review it. And this is exactly what happened in this company. So they did have an audit trail in place, but during the inspection, they didn't even know where to find this audit trail. Of course, then the agency asked them to provide detailed procedures for the robust use and review of their audit trails, and of course, the current status of their audit trail implementation for each and every system in the lab. And in the meantime, come up with interim control measures and procedural changes for the control review and retention of their laboratory data. So moving on to the solutions. So once again, you can find helpful information in part 11 and part 211. So lab and production records must be reviewed, and procedures and controls to ensure data integrity and authorized access to data should be in place. So as I said before, one solution is to first of all, have your audit trail implemented and working properly. So one way to reach this is to validate the functionality using a variety of validation scenarios. Also, think about, once you have your audit trail, think about defining a risk-based strategy for the frequency of those reviews and what to look for, because as you can imagine, audit trails gather an immense amount of data. So it can be quite overwhelming to look at an audit trail and of course not knowing what to do with it. So I think it's really important to have this strategy defined early on, sooner rather than later, of course, once again. And I would like to refer to this leveraging audit trail data to drive process improvements and identify deficiencies in your processes. So this leads us to the mindset that having an audit trail is not only important to comply with the law, so we won't have any trouble with FDA when they come to conduct an inspection in our lab, but also to see it as added value to our company. So it's not only being compliant, but also benefiting from compliance, right? And I believe, Katie, you have a very nice real life example when it comes to audit trail functionality validation.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, and this part about really ensuring the variety of validation scenarios, I recently had an experience where we found the audit trail generally is working, but in specific validation scenarios, we did some stress testing, and we discovered that just for the units, under certain conditions, the audit trail was not working. And so if they hadn't been able to come up with those scenarios and really do that kind of testing ahead of time, we would have run into that in production instead. So it can be a big benefit to get to that up front, for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. So yeah, let's move on to the next one. And this is also often seen during FDA inspections, which is the inadequate segregations of duties. So FDA is quite clear when it comes to appropriate segregation of duties. For example, a system admin role should not be responsible for record content because it's a very powerful role. Therefore, they should not be able to enter any results, for example. Another example is the analyst who is responsible for entering results in a LIMS system, for example, shouldn't be able to approve those same results because we risk that they don't like these results. These results will look bad in their COA, a certificate of analysis, or reports. So this person can just change it. So it is important to have clear or the right setup of roles and privileges for your systems. So in this company, during the inspection in this company, it was not really clear if they had the right setup. So The agency asked them for a detailed summary of their procedural updates and associated training and the appropriate user role assignments. So I believe they asked for the mapping of role privilege of the end users of the systems in the lab. So another recommendation that FDA gave these companies to involve QA managers and also IT experts in this exercise, because this can be quite overwhelming or even a burden for the lab personnel to think of all the roles and privileges and all the privileges that certain roles shouldn't have. Perhaps they are not so much aware of the complying issues of not having the right setup of role privileges. So it's really important that to know that this is really a cross team exercise and not only on the should not only be conducted by the end users. So let's move on to the solutions. So yeah, as I said, FDA guidance is really clear when it comes to adequate segregation of duties. So one of the solutions could be perform a gap assessment on segregation of duties, again involving a big team, so involving QA, involving IT experts, and perhaps this could be done during the periodic review, or ideally to avoid such situation during the implementation of a system, to already do this exercise with the QA and IT experts in order to have a maintained list of authorized access privileges for each of your GxP relevant computer system in use. And I believe now we move on with you, Katie. Can you please tell us about orphan and unreported data?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's another one that comes up a lot, typically in the context of out-of-spec results. You saw it a little bit in the previous example as well. So in this case, the finding was a situation that the company was not reporting out-of-spec results. They were classifying them as trial injections. And so the FDA requested an updated procedure for their analysis testing that specified that they would not conduct trial injections anymore. The other thing is updating their procedures to ensure that all testing would be included in any data package that undergoes quality unit review. That's a huge, huge point, a very important thing to always have all of your data, as we've seen before. And they asked for an assessment of data integrity deficiencies at the facility, whether that's omissions, alterations, deletions of data, records being destroyed, perhaps, or some records not being completed contemporaneously, but also count as a data integrity deficiency. And again, having this kind of assessment done independently can really bring a lot of benefit, because I think it's difficult to have to identify those kind of gaps on the inside. And my biggest quality tip really for this kind of thing is that you want to be rewarding your lab personnel for finding and reporting OX results, rather than having it be kind of a bad thing that they found them, right? So if you can create a situation where people are not thinking, oh, I have an OX, this is bad, we have to investigate now. You really want to have more of a mindset that it's great that we found this OX result, right? It's great that now we know there's a problem with some of our incoming materials, or maybe our instruments aren't working properly, something went wrong with the procedure. This is wonderful, because now we can protect our patients by making sure that we don't put out that drug product today, you know? So getting that mindset in place is really going to bring a lot of value. We've got the
Absolutely,
regulations for
Katie.
you again. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite slides in the presentation.
Yeah, me too, actually. It's something that you have control over, right? Culture is something you really have a lot of control over, and people can help to create whatever level that they're in the company.
Absolutely. James, I believe you have a very nice example. What is a
Exactly.
blame-free environment.
Exactly. When we were preparing this webinar, we were actually kind of sitting and saying, you know, how do other companies do it? What is one way to make it happen, to embrace the challenges of testing failures, and to embrace the quality findings. And I just wanted to take one of my own personal anecdotes. I did a very large implementation project in Latin America. Feels like a lifetime ago, but a few years ago I was there. Um, and the big thing was each team got a count on the defect and deviation system, so we could actually say how many issues did you find before the system is actually going live. So the goal was not necessarily to kind of cover things up. The goal was to find every single problem that could happen in a quality environment before it goes into the production live environment, so that the system will run through. The winning team actually got a trip to Disney World. So that was a really big thing. It was like everyone was really hyper busy on it, looking to find the next error, the next issue, and it wasn't a big, oh, there's 5 problems or 10 problems. It was each problem that was found was, or each bug or each issue was one that didn't make it to production, and when it went live, it was very smooth. It was a very easy way to do it. So thanks, Suzanne. Back to you.
Yeah, that's
Thank you,
fantastic.
James. That's great.
I think that's the greatest example of how to put that into practice.
I've heard it
So,
also works with pizza, free pizza for everybody.
yes. Yeah, if you can, not everyone can afford to send the whole team Disney World, but everyone can do pizza, right?
Exactly, it's cheaper.
Yeah, so additional solutions, what could we do? Reviewing your procedures to ensure that all your data is in, right? And it's in the system, it's retained, and it's available for inspection, whether that's by QA or by clients, if you're a CMO, CRO, and of course by auditors. No classifying data as trial or informal or experimental. Really avoiding that completely is gonna save you a lot of headache. And conducting quality culture assessments, and where necessary, engaging in improvements or remediations. And there's another place where external support can be really, really helpful as well. So if we bring that concept now again into our data flow diagram, it's critical that your team be able to document and report their OS results. You don't want them to be fearing any kind of repercussions. And whenever you're generating that critical data that is used in your process, you want to be sure that the data is not going to be modified or deleted. And our last challenge we're going to share with you today is inadequate third-party management. This is a bigger one than it might sound like. So in this example, we have a notification letter from the FDA. So these are public letters that the FDA will post on their website as a kind of broad public communication on an issue rather than a targeted warning letter. And in this case, the FDA notified sponsors of new drug applications that the clinical and bioanalytical studies that were conducted by 2 contract research firms were not acceptable because of data integrity concerns, and they required that the studies need to be repeated. So this is really, I think, probably the worst case scenario that you could imagine. Having to redo all of that work and effort must have been really devastating. And in this case, the FDA went so far as to change the therapeutic equivalence rating for already approved new drug applications to a BX. And for those who aren't familiar with that rating, that indicates that the data is insufficient to determine that therapeutic equivalence between generics and the brand product. So that really requires a lot of work to do it all over. And it's important for sponsors to realize that whenever you've got third-party research going on, you as a sponsor are still accountable for data integrity, no matter where the actual research is being carried out or testing is being carried out. I put up here, in this case, reference to the Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme of 2021, because they put out this good practices guide, which has some really great tips for third-party management. They get into some excellent strategies. A little bit of that is ensuring adequate control over your third parties, especially The more critical the data is, the more control you want to have, and that should be part of your data integrity strategy as a company. You also want to be checking third-party data regularly, and you want to define how often you do that in a risk-based way. And ensuring security and compliance verification also when you use third-party software or devices, which almost all of us do. You can also enforce this through contracts. I think that's a really important point that I had gotten out of this guidance. So a good example of that is that you have in your contract that regular audits of your vendor are required in order to have continued cooperation with them. And that allows you to formalize how you're managing your third parties and be sure that you really have all the things in place that you need to maintain your accountability. So I hope you got something out of our various challenges today. Susanna, what resources can you recommend to our participants that want to have a closer look into these guidance?
Yeah, so the next slide, we see a list of useful guidance, useful guidelines. But I would like to challenge again our participants to look at the different regulation and guidelines as a positive thing and not a burden, and just to be audit ready because those guys from FDA will come and they will be a pain in our life, but rather to look at them as useful, resourceful information, because in the end of the day, what we want is to have products of good quality out there and to ensure and to protect patient and patient safety and health. So we have different resources. So FDA current good manufacturing practices guidance Q&A is a good one. We have the PICS for data integrity. We have the different GAMP guides for computer system validation and so on. We have data integrity guidelines from the PDA. We have different ICH guidelines, and as James mentioned before, FDA warning letters are a very good resource, as they are real life examples and they keep up with current examples and not they're not focusing so much in laws that were put up 45 years ago, as James said. So I would like now to invite James to join us and to tell our participants where they can turn to avoid such challenges, or if they are already facing them, where to turn.
Yes, here comes the message from our sponsor right. It's the commercial part of the webinar. So first of all, I'm going to be putting in a couple more blogs into the resource link. So feel free to click on those blogs, and where to turn for challenges within lab compliance services and things like that. Well, you could just turn to us right here, right? GxP-CC. We're here to help you with that. We're fully available on that topic. Knowledgeable on it, and as we see today, cutting edge, right? We're on the cutting edge of the topics. So we are going to be issuing out these two blogs or two additional blogs into the chat room right now. Feel free to reach out to us after this session for any of your questions, any of your points. My colleagues Ulrich, Jennifer, and myself are going to be in Boston next week. So if any of you joined in from US and you happen to be in Boston, let me know. We'll be there next week at the DIA conference, as well as on a data integrity training we're doing with the Northeastern University and Peter Baker. So if you'd like to know any more details about that, again, please do let us know. This recording, like I said, is going to be published today in just a short amount of time that we had. We wanted to bring you the most valuable points, the most insights that you can really kind of go through and have as a reference. And Katie and Susanna, you did an excellent job. Thank you for that. And as a follow-up, please do view our blog page. Please do view our channel. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out anytime. We will always be happy to help you through your compliance challenges and move you through those stages. And with that, we're kind of at our closing notes here. So let me just look at our Q&A session. We do have one question in there. I'll go through that one. And if you have any other questions right now is the time to toss them out if you'd like to do it in this session. And if you'd like to kind of reserve your questions and say, it's so super secret, I want to write by myself, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'll be happy to give you an answer to your question as well. So now is the time. But the first question came in, I'll just ask you, Katie and Susanna, how soon after system implementation should companies start conducting audits?
That's a really good one. Do you want to jump in, Susanna, or should I start?
You can go. And I believe
Okay.
James also might have real life examples to share with us as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I would really say that that's something you need to think about in a risk-based way, right? How critical is your system? And also how critical is the data that's coming out, right? Do you have a system where it's standard out of the box? You have everything already pre-tested, or is this something where now you've done a lot of customizations? In that case, I would say you should do it sooner. So as is often the case, when it comes to compliance and data integrity, for me, the answer is really think about it critically and go for a risk-based approach. What do you think, James?
Continued process improvement, right? Continued quality, continued process improvement. I always like to say after the audit is before the audit. So this is really an ongoing process that's going to happen from the moment that you're going to go live. We might even have pre-go live checks, but as the moment that you're going live, that's something that you want to have in place. So with that, I do have one more poll to close out this session. It's going to pop up on your screen one more time, and then we'll let you guys go. If you liked our webinar today, let us know what would you like to know in the future. So we have a couple topics here. Would you like to know about cloud compliance, latest updates on data integrity and computer system validation? Would you like to know about artificial intelligence in pharma, cybersecurity in pharma, quality culture and data integrity, or that mysterious other button, right? So all you need to do is click on one of the boxes and go ahead and hit submit, and then we'll kind of see which one that we want to we're gonna put a little bit of focus on.
Yeah. And while they're doing that, James, I want to circle into something that I see in the chat. Somebody asked about that it's great to reward personnel for identifying and reporting out of spec results, but sometimes the number of deviations in OLS are linked to an individual's KPI, and that can be really a challenge. So I wanted to bring that up because that's actually a great example of how you can shift culture, right? To make quality culture, you want rather to not be linking that, right? You want to be linking it, if you're linking it to an individual's how many OLS they find, what you're actually doing is really putting pressure on analysts and lab operators not to tell you when they find one and to find creative ways to not report it. So I think that's actually a really great example of something to change in culture. And I thought that could be valuable for our folks today.
Katie and I also would like to add that this shows the importance of involving upper management in understanding the meaning of blame-free environment and the quality culture, exactly because of the KPIs. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
I agree. I just closed out that last poll. We have a tie here between latest data integrity and CSV guidances, artificial intelligence in pharma, and cybersecurity in pharma. The great news is we were expecting something along those lines. So we're going to have the next session is going to be on data integrity. That's going to be released in the first week in July. Look out for that in your emails. Check your spam filters because we will be sending you all kinds of great invites. And we'll also be having a session on AI and cybersecurity next on our agendas. So again, thank you all for participating. Thank you, Susanna. Thank you, Katie, for putting this together. It's an excellent job. We also got some thank yous in the comment section here. So this is great stuff. And let me just before I let you all go, let me just paste some of these links in here for the for the points. So there are some more things that you can read up on if you'd like to in a later time, or just check out our blog page or our LinkedIn page. So you could check us out on the web page or on LinkedIn, and you'll find us. And there you go. I just got the link working. I'll take a class on how that works next
Great.
time. Yes.
Thanks.
So there's a great link out there from Fabi on benefits and challenges of digitalization in the lab. So there you go. Thank you all for participating. Any questions, please do feel free to reach out anytime to us. We're here to help. Thanks for joining the Compliance Alliance. And with that,
Thanks,
take care, everyone.
everyone. Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye.